get started. So I'll give a quick background as to who I am. My name is Dee. I'm an intern with Denver Food Rescue, and I'm currently getting my Master's of Social Work degree. So as part of my program, I'm doing an internship, and part of that internship also involves completing or developing some sort of community project. So early on last year, I collaborated with Jamie, and we heard that there was a need for training on policy and advocacy. So based on the feedback we got from our community partners, we developed this training today, and we're really excited to share it with you all. So a big thank you to DFR too for supporting me and the development of this project. So thank you, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll follow along on both screens just so everybody can see, but a quick overview of today's agenda. After our welcome and introductions, we'll move on to defining what we mean by policy and advocacy. Then we'll navigate Colorado's legislative process and learn how bills become laws at the state level. And then finally, we'll finish with learning some advocacy strategies and how we can advocate for the causes we care about. All right, and then we also want to take some time for a land acknowledgement and acknowledge that we are visitors on this land and want to extend respect and recognition to the various indigenous peoples who have called Colorado their home long before us. So with that, I'll go ahead and read the statement. It says, in the spirit of healing, Denver Food Rescue and the Southwest Food Coalition honor and acknowledge that the land on which we live is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We also recognize that a land acknowledgement in itself is not enough. As we work hard to continue to learn from and support Indigenous organizations, we encourage you to do the same. And in that spirit, we also wanted to highlight a handful of local Indigenous-led and Indigenous-serving organizations that work here in Denver. And we want to give a quick shout out to Spirit of the Sun, which is one of our community partners that participates in our No Cost for Food program. So I encourage you to do some further research into these organizations on your own time. And another quick acknowledgement to make is that Denver Food Rescue and the Southwest Food Coalition are both 501c3 nonprofits. And the 501c3 is just the tax designation given to nonprofit organizations. But as nonprofits, we do have some limitations when it comes to engaging in activities of a political nature, like today's training. So we do want to make it clear that we are prohibited from political campaign activity. And what that means is we're not able to raise funds or endorse a particular political party or candidate, but we are allowed to engage in other political activities such as registering people to vote, encouraging people to vote. We're also able to support or oppose particular policies as long as it's done in a non-partisan manner. So we just wanted to make that clear that today's training is allowed. Again, we just can't support or oppose a particular party or candidate. And the same goes for any nonprofit organizations. So literally speaking, a policy is a set of ideas or a plan of what to do in particular situations that's been agreed to officially by a group of people, a business organization, a government, or a political party. But today we're going to focus mostly on state bills and state laws specifically. And then when it comes to advocacy, we define that as public support for an idea, plan, or way of doing something. So advocacy is how we show up and support particular policies. Another distinction I want to make is that advocacy is not the same as activism. So advocacy takes place within institutions and systems. So the goal of advocacy is to convince or persuade our legislators to support the same causes that we care about. And we can do that by writing letters to our representatives, going to the Capitol and testifying on a bill. There are some examples. On the other hand, activism is also demonstrating public support, but typically our messaging is to the general public, and we can engage in activism through protests, rallies, marches, or on social media. So advocacy and activism are both demonstrating public support, but how we do that and who the intended audience is can look very different. So just wanted to make that distinction, and again, our focus is advocacy within government institutions specifically. Our next section, which is all about Colorado's legislative process and how proposed policy becomes actual official law. So to do that, we'll do a quick review of how our government institutions work at the highest level, the national level. And so we have this diagram here, 3 branches of government. We have the legislative branch, which makes or writes the laws, the executive branch, which carries out or enforces the laws, and then the judicial branch, which interprets the laws. And today, we're gonna be focusing on this branch, the legislative branch. And that's because it's the branch that has the most opportunities for us, the people, to get involved and to voice our opinions. And I also want to just cover this really quick because we will be referencing these 2 chambers of it. So our Congress is made up of the Senate and House of Representatives, and together we call that our Congress. And a quick little quiz to test our knowledge and see, does anyone want to share, or do you know how many US senators represent the state of Colorado in DC at the national level? 2, okay, awesome. So I'll show that here. Our 2 US senators currently are Michael Bennett and John Hickenlooper. And again, they represent our entire state. Related to that, does anyone know how many US House representatives represent the state of Colorado at the national level?
8, right?
Yeah, amazing, okay. You guys are on top of it. So yes, we have 8 US representatives. Their names are here, and they represent their respective districts. Okay, so now that we know what our government institutions look like at the federal level, we'll go ahead and zoom in on Colorado specifically. And this chart here also shows that our state government is structured the same way. We also have 3 branches of government with the legislative branch. We have our own state version of the Senate and House of Representatives. We also have an executive branch, but instead of being led by a president, it's led by our governor, Jared Polis. And like the president, he has the ability to veto or sign bills into law. And then we also have a judicial branch with our own state version, state Supreme Court, which hears cases on state law specifically. And another important distinction to make is that our state legislators are not the same as our federal legislators. So as we saw in the previous slide, combined, our senators and representatives, we have 10 that represent our state. Whereas at the state level, Colorado has 100 state legislators that only work on state level laws. And I also wanted to define the word legislator. I'll be using that term to generally refer to both senators and representatives. So rather than saying senators and representatives, legislators is just the collective term for those. All right, so now that we know a bit about our state legislature, we'll learn a bit more about how our state is divided up. So I have here a map of the various districts that our House representatives cover and represent. So it might be hard to see here, but there are 65 districts, one for each of our state representatives. And each House representative has to live in the district that they represent. So with that, they have an awareness or understanding of the conditions in the district that they live in. And you might also see that some of these districts are a lot bigger than others, especially if you zoom into Denver here. We have a ton of districts in the metro area, and that's because each district is supposed to contain approximately the same amount of residents, same amount of people. So each of these districts contains about 88,000 residents. And then if we show the other map here, this is just the Senate map. So the districts are a little bit different. We have 35 state senators and 35 35 districts. And their districts are a little bit bigger because they represent larger areas and larger amounts of people. So each senator represents closer to 164,000 Coloradans. And again, each legislator is supposed to represent the interests of their constituents, and constituent just means the people who live in their district. I think that's it from that slide. Okay, and then from there, I have this annual timeline here that shows some key dates within our state legislative schedule. So starting here, January 8th is when the first regular session started, and that will last until May 7th. And by first regular session, that just means that's the time when our senators and representatives are both working at the Capitol, introducing and voting on bills. And let's see here. This period here, the dates might change from year to year, but it always lasts 120 days. So again, our legislators are only all together for a 4-month period each year. During the remainder of the year, they're still working, but not necessarily voting on bills that we can influence. So from May to December, they're part of intern committees where they're doing research and preparing reports for next year's session. And there might also be special sessions, which are just used in special circumstances when there's urgent issues that need their immediate attention. But for us, for advocacy work, we are focusing on this 120-day period because that's when we are able to influence the decision-making process and advocate for particular bills. And then this flow chart shows how a bill becomes a law in Colorado. A bill is just proposed legislation that hasn't officially become law yet. This chart is pretty complex, so I'm not gonna go through all the details of it, but just wanted to bring to your attention some key parts of this chart. So the first would be that a bill is introduced in one chamber, either the Senate or the House of Representatives. If it is voted on or approved by the majority of that chamber, it will then move on to the second chamber, again, either the Senate or the House, and then eventually it'll make its way to the governor's desk, where he will either veto the bill or sign it into law. And sometimes bills are referred to the people, so we get to decide if they become law or not by voting on them at the ballot box in the fall. So that can be a potential outcome of a bill. And some interesting statistics from last year I wanted to point out is that there were 705 bills introduced in that first regular session last year. And of those 705, 525 were passed and actually were signed into law. So about 3/4 actually made it through and got approved. And there's no limit to the amount of bills that legislators can introduce. So this number can fluctuate from year to year, same with the amount of bills that get passed, but it typically is around 75%, which I thought was interesting. And one other thing I wanted to point out is, I know a lot of the time with advocacy work, we talk about testifying for a bill and showing up either in person or online to give our little speech and support for a bill. And we are only able to do that at these committee hearings. So it happens once in the first chamber and it happens again in the second chamber. So just wanted to make that clear. We don't have a whole lot of opportunities to get plugged into the system, but those committee hearings are where that happens. Okay, and then on the next slide, we also wanted to highlight some current state bills that are currently going through the process of being voted on and have the potential to become law. So these are from Colorado Blueprint and Hunger. They have a really cool policy tracker which will be contained in that resource guide. And these are a handful of food-related policies that I wanted to highlight since that's the common thread amongst our organizations. But on their website, they have descriptions of each of these, and we won't have time to delve into this today, but just wanted to highlight these and also encourage you to also do your own research on bills that might be of interest to you. Okay, and with that, we are going to do a quick demonstration of how to navigate our state legislature's website and to track a bill and see where it's at in the legislative process. So Izzy will follow along with me here, but this is our state legislature's website. At the state level, it's not called the Congress, instead it's the Colorado General Assembly, so that's the name there. And then if we go to the search bar here, we can type in a bill. So I'm going to put in the first one that we saw, so HB, which stands for House Bill 25, which is the year it was introduced, and then the bill number, which gets assigned to it. What number is it? 1010. And so that was the first one on the list there, prohibiting price gouging and sales of necessity. If you click on that, it'll take you to the main page. The prime sponsors are the legislators who introduced the bill. You can also see what committee it's in, and like I showed before, if you want to testify for the bill, you'd have to know what committee it's going to be heard in. If you scroll down below, you can also see the status. So it's currently under consideration. We don't know if it's passed or failed yet. And then below here, we have these tabs where you can read the bill itself here. Fiscal note, you can see how much it would cost to implement the bill. Under committees, you can see the voting record. Same here within each chamber, you can see how many voted yes and no, and you can actually see which legislators voted which way. You can see amendments or any changes proposed for the bill. The bill history shows a timeline of where it's at in the process. So as we saw in that flow chart, it made it through the first chamber and now it's making its way through the second, which is a good sign. And then again, the sponsors of were the legislators who are in support of it. And then at the very bottom, we can see in the upcoming schedule. So this happened earlier today where this bill was read on the Senate floor. If this were to say Business Affairs Committee hearing, then that's when we would get clued in and know, okay, that's when I can go and testify on the bill. So not all of these will have this upcoming schedule. So I also wanted to highlight how to keep track of what's going on at the Capitol on a week-to-week basis. So if we go to the very top of the page, this first tab here, session schedule, we'll go ahead and click that. And then here's today's schedule. It'll show you which committees are meeting, the location, and if we click the agenda, we'll do that here for this third one, you can see exactly which bills are being read, and this would be how we know whether or not we can go and testify for the bill. I wish there was an easier way to keep track of when bills are going to be read, but this is the only way to find out. And since things are always moving so quickly at the Capitol, this only gets updated maybe a week or two in advance, so you have to just keep checking back to stay up to date. But this is a great resource. And one other thing I wanted to highlight is if we go to committees here, if we scroll down to public testimony options, that's when you can sign up for to provide testimony, either in person or through Zoom. Okay, so that's it for the live demonstration for now. If you all have questions about that, we'd be happy to go into that more after the training. And I'll pause here for any questions so far. Yes?
So why would a bill be introduced in a specific chamber? I know you mentioned it could be either the House or in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just choose arbitrarily? Is there an advantage? What's that process?
I know it depends on who's sponsoring the bill. So if it's a bill that a particular representative or group of representatives want to introduce, then that's my understanding. They'll introduce it in their chamber. And Maya?
Depending on the organization and the sponsors of the bill, there could be strategy depending on like leveraging your support in the House or Senate. So like for example, a bill could be like introduced in the House, and let's say the speaker says, hey, this bill and this bill are very similar, do you want to like combine them? And let's say one sponsor says no, we don't want to combine these bills, and you'd probably start one in the House and one in the Senate. And it's mostly strategic, but you want to make sure it just can get the votes to pass through one place to the other, because it has to pass through both.
Right, so it was like die in one. Yeah, I wonder if there was, no pun intended, something political behind like where you would start.
There definitely can be sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you, Maya, for jumping in, because yes, I don't have the most background with that. Any other questions before we move on?
Another great way to just to add as well, if you're trying to get like involved or keep up a lot of it, I know the website tracker can be like, whoa, that's a lot of things to like process. if there's organizations that are working on the bill, or people you trust that are, they're also a great way to keep up with it, because they're gonna want the community to come out and support during testimony often, and just like keeping up with like the flow of what's happening. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're trying to follow a bill that you're like actively sponsoring yourself as an organization or wanting to testify and be involved as an individual too.
Is there a way to track the votes of the different legislatures, like,
Yes, so, again, on that demo, let's see, I can try to show it really quick, but on the, again, the bottom section, either through the bill history or the votes, you can see, how it's doing, so, if we go here.
And you can see who voted.
Yeah,
Under,
we can look at that real quick. So this is in the entire, chamber, in the entire house. And yeah, we can see exactly which legislator voted this or no. But beyond that, let's see here. And then this is more specific to within the committee itself. Yeah, hopefully that answered that. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I know that was a lot of information, so just wanted to wrap it up, put it all together. Hopefully that demonstrates that when the regular session is happening, again in that 4-month period, it's a very fast-paced environment. There are hundreds of bills that are being introduced and voted upon. And related to that, there's no way that our legislators can be fully informed of all the details of all the bills they're voting on. So that's where we come in, and they rely a lot on experts and advocates to describe what the implications of the bill might be. And as advocates too, that's where we can talk to them directly and say, if you pass this bill, this is what the consequences will be for me or my community. So again, that makes a big impact, being able to share. And lastly, our legislators and elected officials work for us. Again, their job is to represent our interests, and if they don't, we are able to influence whether or not they get reelected. So hopefully that will, I know that inspires me to keep better track of if my legislators are actually following through on the promises they make. So with that, we'll move into our final section, which is all about advocacy strategies. And again, advocacy is providing support within institutions. So we'll cover some of the most common ways to do that. And I wanted to give a quick background to this photo. I am quite new to advocacy work. So this is a photo from February when I got to participate in my very first lobby day or day of action with Hunger Free Colorado and Save the Children Action Network. We all went out to the Capitol to support the Healthy School Meals for All program. And I got the opportunity to meet my state senator, Matt Ball, who's there, and wanted to thank Izzy for her help in showing us around, guiding the way. So with that, I wanted to share that advocacy work is very powerful and impactful when we work together in groups, and those with more experience can help guide the way for those who might be less familiar. And so with that, I do want to kind of gauge and see people's level of experience with advocacy work. So if you want to raise your hand, and raise your hand if you've ever visited the Capitol building before. Wow, okay, that's almost all of us. That's awesome to see. Raise your hand if you've ever contacted any of your representatives before. Okay, awesome. That's quite a lot of us. We love to see it. And And raise your hand if you've ever provided or given public testimony on a bill. Okay, couple. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
I've never,
Yeah.
I should say like testified publicly.
Mhm.
But a couple years ago, I tried to go, well, I did go to Washington DC to advocate for the farm bill.
That's amazing. Okay, I would count that for sure. So, but yeah, that's great to see.
How do they decide like who they let give testimony?
Anyone can.
They'll let anybody?
Yes, so with testimony, you don't have to, belong to a particular district or anything like that. But there have been some committee hearings where testimony might last for hours because there were over 100 people who signed up. So anyone who feels strongly.
They have to let everyone do it.
I believe so. I'm not sure if there are time limits actually,
Yeah,
so.
they have to let everybody speak, so, but they'll make the time limit for each person shorter if there's a lot of people. So usually you get 3 minutes to talk, and there's like a timer up there and everything. But if there's a couple hundred people, each person will only get 2 minutes to speak.
And you wanna be aware too that depending on like the bill that you're going to testify for, you know, against or for the bill, where it could be a long time before you get to do that, right? Like I'm working on a bill that's gonna go to committee tomorrow, that we're gonna be there from 3:30 p.m. to potentially 2 a.m. in the morning, right? So like that's just kind of the reality of it. Sometimes if you are gonna do it, you feel like it might not be a time commitment you have. Written testimony is so vital and important, or even doing it via Zoom, the way that they were showing it earlier, you can literally like it's easy as like click, you get the invitation link, have your phone open for a while, you're cooking dinner, and then when they call your name, it's your turn to go, right? And that's another really easy way for if you can't be there physically, or if it starts going too long, that you're available in some way to still do that.
Yeah, no, great strategy. I love that. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and go over some ways to get started in advocacy work if that's something that's new to you. So first and foremost, to identify the issues that are personally relevant and meaningful to you. As we heard, if we are giving testimony or writing to our legislators, it's a chance for us to share our personal story and how these policies will impact us. So it's much more meaningful and impactful if we have a personal connection to the cause we're advocating on. Related to that, determine what forms of advocacy resonate with you. So there's many different ways to get involved in advocacy, either through public speaking, writing, doing research, organizing events. So there's all different ways to get involved. And it's important to play to your strengths, play to your interests, to make that journey more enjoyable and approachable. And lastly, it's helpful to connect with like-minded people in groups. So finding existing advocacy groups that you can join. Again, one of the barriers we saw was sometimes we lack the knowledge or we don't know where to start. And these groups have policy trackers, they have events and trainings. So joining up with them helps overcome some of those initial barriers. And it's more fun to do this kind of work with other people. So with that, we have some, I know, embarrassed, but yeah, I had a highlight. Yeah, it was an important day for me too. So again, these are some official advocacy strategies. Some of the most common ways would be to write letters or phone calls to your representatives. Again, when it comes to contacting your representatives, you have to make sure you're contacting the ones who are in charge of your district, right? Same for lobby days and meeting with your representatives face to face. You will have to find your actual state senator or representative because they prioritize the opinions of their constituents or the people who live in their district. And lastly, providing public testimony during committee hearings. that's open to anyone, and you'll speak in front of a panel of legislators. So in that case, it doesn't matter if you belong to a particular district or not. And then I also wanted to highlight some indirect ways that we can support those more formal or official advocacy strategies. So some indirect ways we can help is through mutual aid, and that's all about sharing resources and time with each other to help us overcome some of those barriers. So that could look like providing childcare, making meals, providing transportation to events or to the Capitol. We can also support advocacy efforts through fundraising, donating to those existing advocacy groups. We can also raise public awareness through social media, with our friends and family, or out in public through, again, marches or protests. And then we can also contact our local news sources and ask them to feature a particular event that was successful. So just wanted to bring to mind there's other ways that we can get involved in advocacy that doesn't have to be showing up at the Capitol. Okay, and then some important considerations, which we already kind of touched on. You have to find your assigned representative, and that's all based on your address and where you live. Second, always include your zip code during correspondence. If you fail to do that, I've heard a lot of the time is your mail or your phone call might be ignored or thrown away if you're contacting the wrong legislator, or if you don't include that. So always include your address and your zip code. Another one is to be brief, clear, and upfront with your message. Again, legislators are receiving tons of mail, and to really grab their attention, say at the top of your letter, I'd like you to vote yes on HB, whatever the bill number might be. And then the last thing is to apply consistent pressure. So again, to kind of cut through that noise and make sure your voice is heard, it's helpful to keep following up with phone calls, letters, emails, visits in person. Or you can recruit friends to also get involved and kind of flood their inbox with messages supporting the same policy. So just applying that consistent pressure during that 120-day period is really important. And then from there, you all can scan this QR code now if you want, but this is a really great website where you just type in your address and it will show you who your representatives are at the federal, state, and the local city level. So you can do that now or at home later. And I also encourage you to visit your representative's website. You can sign up for their newsletter. That's a great way to stay up to date of upcoming events or opportunities to get to meet your representative and advocate for the causes you care about. And then another QR code we have here. This is for the resource guide, which we will also share via email. But this will take you to a Google Doc that has, again, a list of those important websites. I'll also show what that looks like right now, just so you're all familiar. But here is the guide. It has more information about the legislative process, a handful of policy trackers, links to find your representatives. We have guides for how to prepare public testimony, and various advocacy groups at the local, state, and national level. And then we also have resources for finding food immigration-related resources, some self-care resources. So wanted to highlight that and also share that the idea is that we want this to be a living document that we can continue to update. So if there's a really helpful resource that you've come across, please feel free to email us and we can add it to the list and make sure this stays relevant for all of us. Okay, and then with that, we will cover some upcoming events. So here are some opportunities for you all to get plugged into advocacy work. So short notice, but tomorrow there is going to be a meeting through Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger. They have these state policy committee meetings that you can join online. They're open to the public and you can stay up to date with the status of various bills. So recommend that. I also want to highlight the Southwest Food Coalition. If Sydney would like to share a bit more about how to get involved and what you all do.
So what we're doing, and again, this is per the request of our coalition members. This is an identified shared goal was to do advocacy for funding in the food justice space at the city level. So we are specifically advocating to City Council and the Mayor's Office and the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment for what we have termed a Food Justice Fund, which is flexible funding for organizations that are doing this work. We have done this for the past 2 years. It has been really successful and we've had a ton of support from City Council. We are hoping to expand that this year so that we can actually get the mayor on board, because that's sort of where the buck stopped last year. Was the mayor was not interested in setting aside money for that. So it's called the Food Justice Fund. We're rolling that out. I'm really hoping this week. So we will have promotional toolkits, ways to get involved. All of that, I will make sure that that goes to the Denver Food Rescue team and that they can share it out with all of you. The ways that we're looking for people to get involved is obviously you can sign on to this letter to support. If you work for an organization that you think would be willing to sign on as an organization, that's really helpful as well. We will have public testimony opportunities, and then also if you work for an organization and you're willing to either write a dedicated letter to your city council representative, or even collect signatures at your place of work and or programming. Those are going to be some of the ways that you can get involved. But yeah, that's my email. I can send you all the details, but I'll make sure that Dee has all of that stuff too, so she can share.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, great way to get involved at the local level and hopefully establish that food justice fund someday soon. But a great example too of how advocacy work involves sustained effort. It could be a long process. But, and then the other upcoming event I'd like to highlight is the Denver Sustainable Food Policy Council. I don't know, Jamie, if you'd like to speak to that a little bit more about what you all do.
Sure, so I'm a member of the Sustainable Food Policy Council, which is a council that advises the mayor of Denver on food policy. We have monthly meetings which are open to the public. If you, I don't know if you put the link in there or not, but
if you click this.
yeah, if you literally just click that link or just Google that name, you'll find out and you can attend our meetings and hear what we talk about. We just sent a resolution to the mayor about native plants and pollinators. We're currently working on one about land access to make it so that people who live in the city of Denver have more opportunities to be paid for farming rather than it just being like a fun hobby. I think that's the two big policy initiatives we're working on now, and we're gonna be deciding a third topic at our next meeting. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, another way to get involved at the local city-wide level.
Yes, definitely. And it's open to anyone who's a resident of the city of Denver.
Awesome. And then another local opportunity is Denver City Council hosts these public meetings every Monday at 5 p.m. Also, any resident can attend, hear what's going on in the city, and also share concerns with their city council members. And again, you can click these links and it'll take you to the website to register or see the details.
How do you find out, how does like anybody find out about these meetings?
About these in particular?
Like these kinds of meetings?
I mean, this is just through working in this space and learning people who have worked, who work at these places or are involved. But yeah, it's tough to kind of compile the resources in one place. Okay, and then some final takeaways are to set realistic expectations. As we've heard, advocacy work can be a long process, but don't want us to get discouraged by any setbacks, and any sort of incremental change that we make is valuable and helps pave the way for future generations. Another important thing to remember is forms of community building, relying on each other, building connections, and each of us brings unique strengths and life experience. So wanted to highlight that. And lastly, the importance of taking care of yourself, prioritizing your mental and physical health, so that you are able to show up for yourself and for our community members that need us. And with that, we have one quick closing activity for today. We'd love it if everyone could make a pledge or commit to a small action to advance your advocacy journey. So we'll go ahead and pass out these Post-it notes, and if you want to write, again, this is something for you to keep, just a memento of today. An example could be signing up for your representative's newsletter, going with a friend to a community meeting. So we'll give you all a minute or so to write that. And just want to thank you all again for your time and attention. Thank you for being here. And hopefully today you've left with some of the tools and information to go further in policy and advocacy work. If you'd like, we're going to be here a little bit longer to answer any questions, but also help yourself to snacks, connect with each other, and thank you again. It's been my pleasure.